This is the brand new SIRUI 35mm AF lens in L mount. So I wanted to see if this can actually compete or maybe even beat Lumix's own brand L mount 35mm. It's compact, lightweight, sharp, and for the price it's pretty hard to beat. But there is one thing the L mount system really needs, and that is more options. So let's find out if this SIRUI 35mm with its wider aperture and its lower price point is actually a better buy. Here we start with both lenses wide open, and you can see the extra depth from the f1.4 aperture on the SIRUI lens. It just blurs the lines in the roofing in the background a little bit more. But the reason I want to start here is both these look like great images, and it's just a great place to start and show how good both lenses actually are. Now this is a shot on the Blackmagic Pixus 12K. With no correction applied to either lens. The reason I say that is when you put these lenses on Lumix cameras, they behave a little bit different, but we will get to that in just a sec. The first thing that jumps out to me here is if you look down the left hand side, you can just see how much more distorted the building is on the Lumix lens. But here on this Blackmagic camera and other non-Lumix cameras, you will notice that the SIRUI is a lot more controlled. Here's another great example of the extra depth you get on the SIRUI when you are wide open. In and around those leaves on the right hand side, you can just see larger orbs and bokeh, and if you look up to the roof, once again it is just less detailed and smooth. Although the SIRUI does have a wider f1.4 aperture than the Lumix's lens with its f1.8, there is a way that the Lumix actually has more blur in the background that I will demonstrate later in this video. I pulled out my S1 II and took some high resolution raw photos of a lens test chart. Left is the SIRUI and right is the Lumix, and both are wide open. Punching in here, I think the Lumix is ever so slightly a little bit sharper, but I'm not sure how much this will come across after YouTube compression. And moving into the corners, I think it gets much more even. I find it hard to pick which one of these images has more detail. Impressive for the SIRUI as it has the wider f1.4 aperture. So stepping down the SIRUI to f1.8 so it matches the Lumix and things get much more even. Punching in, I don't really know which one of these is sharper. Let's just call it a draw. I would say there's a little bit more contrast coming right out of camera on the Lumix. Now let's get into some more tricky shots for the lenses. I have my torch set to the low power mode in a really unrealistic situation as I'm just shooting it parallel directly down each lens. And once again, on this low power mode especially, these lenses are very close. But once we turn the torch onto the high power mode, we do start to see some differences. The SIRUI has much more elements, as it must maybe have more elements of glass inside it. You can just visually see more parts to the flare, where the Lumix is a little bit softer and just not as prominent, and there are definitely less elements. So if you're someone who wants to not be distracted by a lens flare, then probably the Lumix here. But if you're someone who likes a character and some sort of personality to the flare, then you might go for the SIRUI. Before we get into the biggest differences between these two lenses, I just wanted to show you a nice, cleanly lit shot of a color chart, just to show you how close the colors on these lenses actually are. Even when comparing on a vector scope, which will plot each one of those color chips somewhere onto a hue wheel so we can see a really detailed version of where each color is landing. The only very small difference here is that the Lumix is ever so slightly more magenta and a little bit more saturated, but these amounts here are pretty much unnoticeable to the eye, as you can see looking at both shots side by side. Remember when I said that even though the SIRUI has the better f1.4 aperture, you can actually get more depth on the Lumix lens? Well, that comes down to minimum focus distance. So this is a shot with both lenses at their minimum focus distance, and as you can see, you can get so much closer on the Lumix, and the closer you can get to an object for focus, the more blurred the background will be, and this is just physics. So here is an example of that in action. Both these lenses are wide open, and even though the SIRUI is at f1.4 and the Lumix is at f1.8, look how much bigger the bokeh and orbs get on the Lumix when I'm going to the end of each focus. Even if I place both lenses to a matching f2.8 aperture, you can still see how much bigger those orbs get on the Lumix. So I do think overall, in general use, whatever that means, you would get more depth in your images shooting wide open from the SIRUI, as I believe a 35mm is not a macro lens, so you're not going to be chasing minimum focus too often. And also there is other benefits from that wider aperture, like the extra stop of light that will hit the sensor. I did try hunting for chromatic aberration on both lenses, and just right off the bat, they are both really good. I had to really pixel peep across multiple images until I actually did find some. And I would say my results in the short testing I did, the Lumix is definitely worse, but none of them would cause you any issues unless you really started pixel peeping into your video or photos. So let's get into testing focus. For all the tests here, I did use the Lumix S1 II, and right away, none of the lenses, neither the SIRUI or the Lumix, had any issue communicating with the camera, finding faces, and functionality wise, from that point of view, they was both fantastic. One consistent thing I definitely noticed across multiple tests is that the Lumix lens is faster at getting to where it wants to go, or you might say pulling focus. This is just me guessing, but maybe the Lumix has slightly faster motors inside the lens, because on the back of the camera, it is locked on. The SIRUI lens knows where it wants to go, and it does get there and lock on once it's there. And the Lumix performs just the same. It just gets there, I would say 10% faster. And for the shots you are seeing now, I had all the AF settings maxed out to as fast as they could be across both lenses. Now, for my style of shooting, this would not be an issue, as I'm very rarely trying to get a really fast focus response. I'm more of kind of middle ground, where I just want it to find and stay where it needs to be and then not lose its position. But I guess if you're a photographer and you constantly want single shot, I did do a little bit of testing, noticed it is kind of 10% slower in that mode as well, then this may be an issue. I guess it totally comes down to how you work and how fast you need your lens to be. I did do some short testing for focus breathing, and both lenses are really good, as you would expect from a 35mm prime lens. Now let's quickly compare the build quality and how I found the usability to be on both these lenses, as they definitely have strengths and weaknesses in different areas. Starting off with the Lumixes and where its pros are, I would say if you are someone who prioritises keeping things really small, not necessarily lightweight, as there's not a lot in it in terms of weight, but small and compact is at the top of your priority, then lean towards the Lumix. And also, if you have one of those fancy new Lumix cameras, the S1 II or S1 II, you also get cropless IBIS, which is fantastic, but only works on Lumix brand lenses. You will also get those in-camera corrections when using a Lumix lens on a Lumix camera, like distortion and vignetting correction. This is not massive, as even in video and photography, this is really easy to fix in editing. But I guess, again, if you want to be small, compact, with a really fast turnaround, maybe to Bluetooth to social media, then this could be a pretty big deal. Which takes me nicely on to the SIRUI's positives. Obviously, if you are using a non-Lumix camera, it's just going to be more correct with less distortion out of camera. But something that really did surprise me was the build quality. I would say it's definitely better than the Lumix lens, but being cheaper, I didn't really expect this. It's made out of a metal, where the Lumix is made out of a plastic, but that does come at the cost of a slightly bigger and heavier lens. And when it comes to functionality of the lenses as well, I would say the SIRUI is way better. Number one, which is massive for video shooters, it has an aperture ring on the lens itself, which can be locked and also can be declicked. This gives us the option to smoothly change the aperture with our hand when capturing video. There's also a function button on the SIRUI lens, which is compatible with all the Lumix cameras. So you can go into your Lumix menus and pick between like 20 or 30 different options to make this button whatever you would really like. Overall though, both of these lenses are really great in their own right. The SIRUI hits an amazing price point, I think. It's really great value for money, which is going to be perfect for people on a budget and can compete, if not beat in some areas, Lumix's own brand lens. And that Lumix is just so small and compact. It's one of the smallest 1.8 primes out there for full frame cameras, and also gives you that amazing cropless IBIS. So let me know in the comments below which one of these lenses that you would rather have, and if you want to see this style of testing but with the best L mount zoom lenses, watch this video here.